In 2024, I boarded Iona for the first time. It was around 15 years since my last P&O cruise, and I hated it. When Princess and MSC cancelled on me last minute at the end of 2025, my only choice was a two-nighter going nowhere on Iona or no trip at all. So I reluctantly clicked book now and crossed my fingers. No stags, no hens, and a trip that was far better than I'd feared. Which prompted me to book another proper 7-nighter to decide once and for all what I really thought of this ship. There was good, there was bad, and now my opinion is set in stone. Here, ladies and gentlemen, we go. Oh, there it is. Even if the memory of the rubbish 2024 Iona trip hadn't mostly been washed away by a surprisingly good 2025 visit, just getting off the loser cruiser and away from the road rage coach driver made it exciting to spot the ship. I stepped off the coach at 2:09, had a wee walk to take this snap, then sped through security so quickly that I barely had time to take my belt and watch off before I was putting them back on again. I stepped on board at 2:32. Almost double my 12-minute ship boarding record, but still faster than boarding even the privatest of private jets. I'd picked up a Pret on the journey. I blinkin' love Pret, don't I? So I gave the buffet a swerve and headed straight to my cabin to drop off my school bag and pick up my cruise card. If you haven't watched one of my reviews before, now is the time to hit pause, make a hot drink, and settle in. Here comes the cabin tour. Beds, sleep there. This is a desk if you're a boy, it's a dressing table if you're a girl. There's a TV for when you get bored. Hang your clothes up here. Dirty socks and pants go there. This is where you shower. Brush your teeth here. And this is where you can, Cabin tour over. A couple of minutes after I closed the door, whilst I was still moaning to myself that they'd messed up the beds and given me 2 singles instead of the double that I'd asked for, my cabin steward knocked on and came in to tell me all the usual. He asked if everything was okay. I mentioned the mistake with the beds and asked if he could swap them when he got a minute. And I was a bit surprised / extremely fished off when he basically argued, saying my list says twin beds, and more or less told me to get funked. I did my usual, well, I can make my own bed, so don't bother with this cabin. But normally, what I'm saying is you don't have to clean up after me. In this case, I was saying you don't get to clean up after me, which I'm pretty sure rocked him to his boots. He's probably still gutted about it now. I turned on the TV to play the emergency drill video, which I obviously didn't watch, and I dropped into the theatre doorway to check in at my muster station on my way to the coffee shop. Well, I say coffee shop. It's more like one of those kiosks that you find in the corridor of a shopping centre. Or, yes, as everyone very originally points out, an airport lounge. I ordered my coffee at the counter and I took a seat on the Manuel Martinez stool. Partly because it's a good spot to sit and watch what's going on in the giant atrium. But it was partly to confirm that he wasn't on board. The atrium on here is certainly distinctive. It's huge, bright, and crammed with the stuff. Open plan bars, specialty dining, shops, coffee, buskers, and 3-story windows. I like my coffee like I like my cruise tubers. Hot, bitter, and black. Just like me. If I was also hot and black. When the dude brought it over, he also brought a hot chocolate, which I told him wasn't mine, and he took it away. A few minutes later, the same guy came back with a wee cake thing and told me, "This is for you," which I also hadn't ordered, but I just shrugged and I ate it. It was consistent with P&O's policy on puddings and cakes. It was tasteless, gelatinous rubbish. This one turned out, retrospectively, to be worse than normal. because I later discovered that they charged me $2.95 for it, something I didn't order, didn't want, and definitely didn't enjoy. Little rascals. I wandered around briefly, but Iona is chaotic on Embarkation Day. So I headed back to my twin single beds and I had a little snooze. I woke up fully refreshed and made myself beautiful, ready for dinner. I mean, that didn't take long. I'm pretty foxy. I dropped into the Keys for a coffee before heading to the Limelight Club for dinner. Limelight is as close as P&O has to Queen Anne's Bright Light Society, but it's a bit more serious. There's pay extra dinner and a show, which is what I was booked in for, and there's plenty of included shows and discos slotted in the gaps. The entrance is in the middle of the art gallery, where, would you believe it, they've actually got one of those ultra-rare Lady Di Banksy notes that you just can't get anywhere, and definitely should buy before they rocket in value. Like every other ship I've been on for the last 18 months. Amongst the other not investments, they've also got some Mr. Brainwash, which the Limelight Club will be the venue for a talk/disingenuous sales pitch for. Tut, tut. Anyway, the show was a musical theatre lady called Cassidy Jensen. It was a weird evening. There was only 23 people in the venue, which comfortably holds a few hundred, so there was no atmosphere, and the whole thing was dragged out over about 3 hours. Nothing happens for ages, then a band play, then nothing for ages. One of the Ents team does a Q&A with the artist, but nobody knew who she was, or at least I didn't, and nothing very interesting was said. There was more nothingness, and finally she comes on and does some singing on us. To be fair, that bit was very, very good. Still, at least the food was pretty awful. A bruschetta thing, mushrooms pretending to be more, low quality overcooked beef, and a typical P&O pudding. So much Shawshank, and not nearly enough redemption. Now I'm an old-fashioned guy, so after dinner, I automatically head to the show, even if dinner was dinner with a show. Night one in the theatre was digital. It's been doing the rounds on P&O for a while now, but if you want more detail, look out for the entertainment deep dive coming soon. I finished up the day with a few laps of prom deck and a coffee looking out over the wake like a creepy old weirdo. I was up and out early on day 2, first in the queue when the doors opened at Aqua. That's one of the 2 smaller main dining rooms. Again, I'll deep dive all the food in a separate video. But what I will say here is that this is pink grapefruit juice. And it's not pink. A couple from Liverpool were sat at the next table. We did a bit of chit-chat before they asked me about God and gave me some leaflets from their church. I haven't read them yet, but I promised that I would, so I will. Because I do not lie. I bashed out some laps of prom deck and dragged my creaky old carcass around the gym, before nipping to Ocean Studios, Iona's cute little 4-screen cinema, where I'd intended to watch a Ryan Reynolds movie called Free Guy. But a bit of a snooze just snuck up on me, so I only actually saw the first and last 3 minutes. I had lunch at a shared dining table in Pearl, which is one of the whopper main dining rooms. My table mates were a couple of P&O superfans, an Irish guy with a very sinister voice, but a sunny disposition who is going on a river cruise next, and a Scottish guy who took pride in what a cruise ship loser he really is. In a rare incidence of restraint, I just let him tell me all about cruise ships, instead of slamming him with my far superior loserishness. I grabbed my laptop and I wandered around, looking for a peaceful place to do some top-secret cruise tube work. The clubhouse was dead, so I set up camp in there, and after about half an hour, Turtle Tut's Toddler Club started. 2 young ladies popped in and had a session of singing and games and playtime, with, a dozen little kids waddling around. It was really cute, and I was just about to take a couple of pictures when I thought, you're a 42-year-old man, travelling alone, and none of those are your kids. What are you doing? So there's no pictures or footage. Just take my word for it, it was sweet. First sea day is gala night. On both previous Iona trips, I'd booked into the chef's table, and both times it was rubbish. It's just a bit of buffet with tablecloths, gloopy powder-based French onion soup, and beef Wellington that is at best the equal of a Greg's steak bake. And I think I've been clear about all P&O puddings. So I spared myself the disappointment and I booked into Sindhu. Now I don't really like Indian food and I'm certainly not in the habit of paying extra for it. But the venue looks really nice and I thought I'll give it a crack for a change. FYI, if you ever find yourself in a ship-wide game of hide and seek on Iona, you won't find a better hiding place than this spot under the Sindhu stairs. Obviously, I headed from Sindhu to Headliners Theatre for the first of 2 shows that week with Ben Francis, a knowingly cheesy musical theatre dude, before some late night wandering that ended with coffee at the Infinity Pool, where I did my usual madman weight gazing. At first, I was tempted to have a midnight dip, but as you can see, they've got some pretty robust security measures in place and it is literally impossible to get in. Things started to go downhill fast on day 3. I skipped breakfast and kicked off the day with a trip to the gym, and I fit my laps in before lunch at the Olive Grove. Now, the Olive Grove is a Mediterranean restaurant that's included in your fare, but some dishes do cost extra, and you do need to book. It was just my good fortune that it is right next to the clubhouse, where Turtle Tots had a dinosaur workshop going on shortly after. I blinkin' love dinosaurs, don't I? Admittedly, it was aimed at a slightly lower age group, and I could have smashed the rest of the tots in the quiz if I wasn't so gracious. Again, no images or footage, but it was great, and I did nearly cry when they played the Jurassic Park orchestra piece. It was bloody cold in Hamburg. The river had frozen. Obviously, this is a ship full of British people, so the hot tubs were still full. Iona, unusually, has 3 performances of each theatre show every night, and you have to book the one that you want to see. This meant that I was forced to see the early show at 6:45. Sky's the Limit, another long runner on P&O. But this time, it was an absolute banger. I headed straight from one show to another and did the 10-deck trek up to the Sky Dome. The Sky Dome is the Center Parcs golf ball plonked on top of the ship. It's where families set up camp early doors and they don't leave till bedtime. Rise is not for me, but the kids in the audience were loving it. I realised I hadn't eaten and I was right next to the buffet, so I nipped in. This was a mistake. I generally steer clear of ship buffets most of the time because of the chaos. I steer clear of this buffet because the people using the place were beasts. There are multiple hand wash stations and alcohol gel dispensers at every entrance, but I think I was the only one that used them on the entire 7-week cruise. Because of these animals, I lost confidence in the food on offer and I hung around waiting to pounce on anything that dropped fresh before the savages could touch it. De-fluffing disgusting. Sadly, peasants fingering the buffet with unwashed bum-scratching hands was not the most disgusting thing I encountered in the buffet that night. The ship had been to Hamburg that day, and one of the excursions is to a concentration camp. Now, if you are this far into one of my videos, then I know that you don't need to hear this, but let's say it out loud anyway. The Holocaust was 100% real, and your man Adolf was not a stooge for their elite, getting rid of their undesirables. If you're a man, and this kind of horror is being spoken by a lady, then it can be tricky to know what to do. If her partner is trying to stop her saying such nonsense without causing a domestic, you can just say, "You are being really patient about this utter bullskip," and then moved to a less idiotic table. I miss napkin throwers being the worst people in the buffet. More coffee, more wandering, and into the 7:10 Club for the late show. These shows are included in your fare, but you do have to book all but the late show. They were always full, so late show it was. I can go to the late show. I'm allowed to stay up as late as I want. The 7:10 Club is a grassroots live music venue famously designed by Gary Barlow. You might think, what the funk does Gary Barlow know about designing a venue? And, well, you'd be right. There are pillars blocking the view, the stage is a small area plonked in a corner with wood chip wallpaper, and there are wires and lights tacked and taped up all over the place. It works because it's a grungy, real music atmosphere, but the claim that it's purpose-built is ridiculous. It's very much got a students gigging in the corner of a boozer kind of vibe, which is weird because I hate students, I hate gigs, and I hate pubs. I was in here loads. I started day 4 on deck 5 working up a sweat, before a pay extra breakfast at Keel & Cow in the atrium. I've got strong feelings about this meal. Watch the dining review when it drops. I walked off the sausages on prom deck, then headed to Headliners for a strange and confusing hour with a former soldier. I ate lunch in Coral, the other whopper main dining room, this time on my own, and I generally floated around from coffee to coffee, no blinkin tomato juice on this ship, before catching the early show, a trio called Midnight in Vegas, knocking out country and folk. I folkin' love country. I was a bit stressed out that they were all dressed the same, but they didn't have matching shoes. I mean, I coped, but I wasn't happy. I squeezed in a few laps, then joined the queue outside the Limelight to see the Limelights, the house band, followed by cruise ship comedian Noel Brody. Midnight in Vegas right before and 7-Ton Club right after helped me resist the urge to throw myself, or more likely Noel Brody, overboard. Night 4 ended with a minor but real sexual assault. I wandered out onto prom deck to bash out some laps and do some wistful wake staring, and as I got to Sunset Bar at the back of the ship, a voice from the shadows sort of engaged me in chit-chat. It was a petite wee crew member, and he asked me if I was meeting anyone. I said I wasn't. I asked him if he was, and he told me that he was waiting for a blind date. So far, so chit-chatty. I sort of said goodbye, and he asked me if he could have a hug. I said, be a bit weird, but okay. I mean, crew are often quite huggy. I'm not the type that ever really feels threatened, and as it turns out, I'm also incredibly naive. He grabbed at my special place, he tried to kiss me, and as I pushed him away and turned to leave, he called after me, please don't tell anyone. I mean, I've emailed P&O and I've told you, but don't let it go any further. It's fair to say day 4 was mixed. Coffee for breakfast, followed by some top secret laptopping in the crow's nest. I set up camp, and when the waiter came over, I asked for a large black coffee. He told me they don't do large, only small and medium. I did start to argue that if there's only 2 sizes, then one is large and one is small. But he looked blank, repeated, we only do small and medium, so I just said, medium please, and I did my best to let it go, which obviously I never will. I had lunch in one of the big MDRs and wandered around the high decks for most of the afternoon. For the first time in the history of cruising, I actually saw some people properly playing and enjoying shuffleboard. There's a load of space on top of Iona, but it was chilly and nobody was really up there, apart from the hot tubs. Obs. British people in it. Back to Keel & Cow for a pay extra steakhouse dinner. Again, I've got feelings about this. Dining review to follow. And Ben Francis, the musical theatre dude, was the show. After which, I did the 10-deck trek to see Liz Jones as Taylor Swift. Now this really was something. And I'm considering starting a Taylor Swift tribute act of my own. If nothing else, This at least allows me to shoehorn in a mention of when I was one of 300 guests at a private event in Kensington Palace when Taylor Swift and Prince William did karaoke with John Bon Jovi and Colin Firth stole my taxi. Jonathan Ross emceed. Clang. The 710 Club band had a night off and a teeny stage hosted Maddie Wright, the busker, who does not sound like you think she will when you see her. She looks rocky, she sings folky. Nobody me too'd me as I did my laps, but a big brave boy did ask me, "What's your problem?" as I muttered bad words to myself as I walked through a big cloud of pink bubblegum or whatever it was, as he was vaping in a non-smoking area. I was quite descriptive about what my problem was, but I didn't swear, I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't uppercut him into the sea. Another day done. I hit the gym first thing. I needed to be in tip-top shape in case of any gang-related pink bubblegum retaliation. Then I dropped into Anderson's, which is the quiet retreat with a very, very modest little library. It wasn't even open, but I needed to get a YouTube video finished and uploaded, otherwise both of my subscribers would kick off. The Glass House is another of the open-plan shopping centre venues in the atrium. It's a wine bar that also serves tapas and some other sort of platter-type meals. I had my lunch here, and in what may be the continuation of my slide down a slippery slope, I also had a glass of wine. They do two sizes, 175 and 250, so I suppose I had a medium. First a 175 on Ventura in November, and now this just 3 months later. I think I might need an intervention. I headed outside to knock out some laps. Who knows how many kilometres I covered. Obviously, I was splashed and weaving around the place like Norman Wisdom. I can only assume that I hadn't sobered up by mid-afternoon, because I nipped into the buffet for a snack on my way to the Crow's Nest for a sobering medium coffee. Again, I was forced into the early show, this time Greatest Days, to take that musical. Now, I should have already seen this about 100 times before, but it just seems to get cancelled more than right-wing comedians. I had a wonderfully enjoyable dinner in one of the Whopper MDRs. I was at a shared table with a German dude and his English wife. Obviously, I asked them, what did they do at the weekend and where is the hospital? A quite unpleasant couple who had questionable views on every conversation, and a couple who tricked me into thinking that they were lovely by being fascinated by me, which I always adore. The majority of the time, I was having a lovely time listening to German and horrible couple discussing the NHS, politics, and a Netflix show about a woman who did or didn't kill loads of children. Fun. I had a wander through, up and around the atrium to gawp at the silent disco. They all seemed to be having fun, but I didn't join in. I did have some fun once, and it really was not for me. Trigger's Broom, that's Pulse, the band that's had 37 new singers and 100 or more of each musician. We're doing a country show in the clubhouse, so I dropped in there for a little while too. It's literally just like a clubhouse on a British holiday park. Kids shows, bingo, house band, quizzes, all that kind of thing. Dinosaur workshops aside, the clubhouse isn't really for me. But I blinkin' love country, don't I? As I was walking from the clubhouse to nowhere in particular, Pink Bubblegum and his buddy, who wasn't there before, stopped me to ask, "Remember me?" They didn't look like they were about to apologise, so I said, "Yeah, you're the guy who thinks it's weird that I don't like people smoking in no smoking areas." Obviously, I was being a PR1K. He was a PR1K, and I didn't get the feeling that he wanted to be friends. He started telling me that he didn't appreciate my tone last night, but then the buddy interrupted, waving his arms around and quite loudly demanding, "Where does it say we can't smoke out there? Where are the signs?" He cracked his knuckles, which I think was supposed to be intimidating. It wasn't. I did consider de-escalation, but I found myself going the other way with it and saying, "Well, I can't see any signs in here saying that I can't knock funk out of two chavvy morons. Can you?" But I didn't really say funk. and I didn't really say morons. It was pretty cold, and you know how big angry things shrivel and disappear in the cold? Well, that happened. I did my laps, I drank my coffee, I did my wistful wake stare. My final day on board was a weird one for me internally. I did a lot of stuff that I'd been putting off because it's not what I'd choose to do, but I wanted to get through it to be complete when I reviewed the ship. But because I never crossed paths with any guests that made me want to pull out my own eyeballs just so that I'd have something to stuff in my ears, it was a pretty breezy and enjoyable day. I started off with a visit to Brody's, the onboard boozer. Almost always busy. And not really somewhere I'd go, but I'm dedicated to being thorough for both of my subscribers. I thought if I have to come here, a morning quiz will be the least upsetting to my delicate sensibilities. It was a British sitcom quiz which I won, but I didn't claim because, well, honestly, I was a bit ashamed. I continued the stuff I don't want to do but will anyway by schlepping up to the Skydome for lunch at Taste V60, the poolside grill. Some kind of bean stew thing, a burger that was as you'd expect, and I walked among the beasts to grab a couple of coffees. The included coffee is absolutely fine, FYI. The early show was the only one that I could get into again, midnight in Vegas doing a different show. Not as country, not as good, but still good. And this time they were dressed differently, so the shoe mismatch didn't bother me. Taylor Swift wasn't Taylor Swift anymore. She was Lady Gaga now, and she was still quite something. I packed my bag, and then I went on my usual Elton John farewell tour of the ship. I spent about 1,000,000 hours just wandering around. I dropped by the buffet at around 1 a.m. and pounced as soon as fresh meat dropped, and I made myself a couple of bun-free cheeseburgers. I milled around aimlessly until the early hours, but when my phone picked up O2, I knew it must be pretty late, and I headed back to my twin single beds. I do like an MDR breakfast on debark day, but I pressed snooze a few too many times, and I ended up in a bit of a rush. So I grabbed a couple of omelettes, a juice and a coffee in the Keys, and I headed to the theatre just in time to be kicked off. Debark was quick, and I was on the loser cruiser headed north in no time. 0 pineapples spotted, 0 other cruise ships spotted, and about 1,000,000 ducks. Okay, the money. I paid £957 for solo occupancy of a standard inside room. Internet access clocked in at £101.17, so neither of my subscribers missed a trick. My bar bill consisted of black coffees, Diet Cokes, and a large red wine, totaling £37.31, plus £2.95 for a horrible cake that I didn't ask for. I'd booked the Limelight Club dinner and show before I boarded, and that was £31.25. Sindhu totaled £24.25, and whilst the pudding was as rubbish as all P&O puddings, it's cheaper to buy 3 courses than 2, so I choked it down. Lunch in the Glass House was £14 and a penny, and breakfast in Keel and Cow was £3.32. Dinner in the same venue was £26.08. I had an upcharged dish in the main dining room, which was £11.35, and as it was a freezing cold February in Northern Europe, obviously I had an ice cream for £4.08. The whole trip weighs in at £1,244 and 2p, or £177.72 per night. Now, I feel like I've given Iona a fair chance. I hated it on my first visit, I was pleasantly surprised on my second, and I've seen enough now to know that I won't be back. The ship itself is modern and clean. There's good and bad when it comes to the food, the entertainment and the guests. I mean, the bad guests were bad. It's a big ship, but it's not nearly big enough for the number of guests on board. It's crowded, and you feel like you're always in a queue or waiting to be served. And I mean, being charged for a P&O pudding that you didn't even ask for, well, that's more upsetting than unwanted grown-up cuddles from the crew at midnight on the prom deck. I'm actually a bit shocked that P&O still haven't responded about that. It's almost 2 weeks later. There was a couple of other cruise tubers on board, and it's fair to say they had different experiences, so you might want to see what their verdict is. But I mean, you'll be better off watching my deep dives on food and entertainment and whatever else I feel like gossiping about, because I am a fascinating dude. So, there it is. P&O Iona, well and truly done.